Hi guys, welcome back to Anodialogue, the dialogue on analog music reproduction. Well, finally, we're back with a new episode of Hi-Fi Myths, Mistakes, and Beliefs, Volume 3. Are you ready? Let's take a look. Okay, as most of you already know, each volume observes 5 main topics where we discuss the details, the conceptions, the ideas going around 5 main topics, sometimes beliefs, sometimes true facts. It's not only a matter of dismantling ideas connected to hi-fi, but also reinforcing them sometimes and analyzing better. So it's not, as I said, a form of disruption, of destruction, but is also a reassessment of certain aspects regarding hi-fi reproduction. Okay, so let's jump to our first topic. Let's get to it. Okay, so our first topic is vinyl consumption, or we could call it vinyl wear out. What am I talking about? Well, there's a strong conception, belief in this case, that if you listen too much your vinyl records, they are going to wear out after years of usage. Now, this is true. It's true if you repeatedly listen your records in the same session. Like, for example, I'm going to listen to the same song 10 times and I'm going to do that for a month. And most importantly, if the tracking force is too strong, is too high of your cartridge. That's the main key point. That's why a lot of people in the past, like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, did not have proper tools in order to understand if the tracking force was too strong. And usually to get a good sound, you would push that needle. You were wearing out your vinyl records, actually. Yes, because if the tracking force is too hard, you're really pushing the grooves there. So if you instead use the recommended tracking force of the manufacturer of your cartridge producer, or in general, you follow some indications which do not go above, I don't know, usually it's around 1.5, 2 grams. It depends. There are other cartridges that reach 3 grams, which require that. But obviously, when we're going above 2.5 grams, there is going to be some suffering of the grooves. But again, if you do not repeatedly listen that same track, no problem, guys. The same record is going to go on decades and decades. There's no wearing out, or at least very, very, very little, not enough to somehow compromise the sound of the record, of the playback, which instead may occur actually on CDs, because they realize that this may happen after like 50 years or so. The plastic, those silicons, that silica that is creating the disc itself, the silver disc, but also the plastic of covering the CD itself, in most cases, if it's not of high quality, is going to start to decay. So it's much more probable that in 1 million years we're going to be able to play a vinyl record than a CD. Oh, you can be sure about that, even because analog, you just need to somehow track it. Even with a piece of paper, you can get sound out of a vinyl record. Yes, there are videos on YouTube where there are guys putting a cone of paper on it, and you can hear the music coming out. Well, instead, in 1 million years, CDs, if you don't have a CD player, you're stuck with a piece of glass. Okay, let's proceed. Okay, so let's get now to topic number 2. New is not always better. And I'm referring mainly to hi-fi gear. As, for example, a television or a refrigerator or a microwave, you're always going to think new is better, and you're probably right. But if we're talking about music, audio, hi-fi gear, that is not always the case. Absolutely. If you guys know what to look for in the vintage selection, in the past productions, I would say mainly of the 70s and 80s, you're going to find top-notch gear. Also because if we're talking about analog especially, as you can imagine, digital is now and the future. So instead, if we're talking about analog, that was more in the past. Now we do not have the necessary proper gear to reproduce that, except for turntables, which are relatively easy to do, especially belt-driven turntables. But if we're talking about amplifiers, tube amplifiers, phono preamps, cassette decks, reel-to-reel recorders, obviously, but also other things that we are still using today, the ones produced in the 70s and 80s are very, very good. I know they have 40, 50 years on their shoulders. That's true. But if you properly maintain, clean, set up, send to a lab, you will have optimal results at a fraction of the price of a new piece of gear. Like, for example, if you get a cool, good quality amplifier, I'm sure if you go to the top models, which were high-end back in the 30, 40 years ago, and you restore it and properly set it up today, it will be as good or even better than newer models produced today. Oh boy. Okay, let's proceed. Topic number 3. Remaster does not mean better. Oh no. That is something that during mainly the 90s I went through a lot. Because you kept on seeing these new CD versions where this lettering on remastered. Oh yeah, remastered. We were all chasing that. How stupid of us. And sometimes they're still doing it today. Remastered, if it's a true remaster, if people know what that means, it means that they took the master tapes, hopefully the session tapes, otherwise that's too easy. The session tapes would be the best to do a new mix. Otherwise they took the master tapes and they digitalize it, obviously, in order to re-equalize all the hiss, pus, pick, pop, pops, clicks, all the and the change in speed, whatever you can think, in order to have a perfect file. And also compress the darn thing in order to have a good pumping volume. So that's the problem with remastering. They have been doing this year by year, decade by decade, since the birth, obviously, of CDs, where they had to do it the first time. First, the converters were not optimum. After a few years, they were, but unfortunately, the loudness war started. Which the loudness war, if you don't know what that is, Google it. But it's mainly a compression in order to squeeze the dynamic range, but if you squeeze it, at that point you have a higher volume. It's louder. The sound is louder, and that's what people want. Or at least that's what they think they want. The producer want it, unfortunately, today. So when you see remastered, again, be careful. Because even if it's done correctly, keeping the curves how they should be, the dynamic range, everything is done properly, they're just doing a flat transfer, you never know if it's, as I was saying, a flat transfer, or if instead they're changing a few things, like the speed. They find different aspects that they want to correct, because that's what an engineer does, but then you're going to change the sound, the original sound of that album. So I mean, for example, there are fantastic reissues done by Steve Wilson of famous albums, where he changes, I would say, pretty dramatically the sound, and in most cases enhancing specific things that were a little on the side. So that's, in most cases, I would say that's a good mastering process. But a lot of people don't do that. They correct, hyper-correct, disrupt, destroy, change dramatically what was the original conception, the original sound of that album. Hence, I would always try to go to the first digital versions or audiophile versions where people are careful of this, or as you know it, go back to the original. Can't go wrong there. Okay, let's pass to our next topic. Topic number 4. Topic number 4 regards the misconception, I would say, of that music is selling less, that piracy is overcoming. That was big 10, 15 years ago, mainly in the 90s, where digital became big and the file exchange became huge, bigger and bigger. Now it's obviously massive, and nobody is trying to stop that anymore. It's just ridiculous. There's no more DRM in the different online or digital or CDs or whatever sales. They took that out because it's useless. You can't stop it. And actually, some enlightened people understood that that's a good way for promoting your music, and someone is going to buy it afterwards. But we always have this kind of nostalgic scene that music sales back in the 60s, 70s, 80s were huge, were massive, while instead today that is not the case. Well, it is true. It is true. And in fact, in a moment, we're going to see a few aspects, a few percentages, some numbers on the sales, just to have an idea. But we must remember something. In the past, people were selling millions of records. Now, a good musician, a popular musician, is selling only hundreds of thousands of records. Let's take a look at the numbers now before proceeding. So, actually, the only country that more or less kept its standards is the US. All the rest dramatically brought down what we all know as the golden record, the platinum record, or the diamond record. I'm sure you heard this. The certifications established in every country, the most famous is the one by the Recording Industry Association of America, the RIAA. And when it was introduced, in order to obtain a gold record award, you had to achieve 500,000 sales, and the same in singles, because singles were big in that time. Then rapidly that changed actually, and they brought that up. Obviously, I'm gonna have to read a few of this information. I don't know it all by my mind. This was rapidly corrected in the 70s, where they brought to have a golden record, you had to sell 1 million albums and 1 million singles. And instead, platinum, which it's huge, you had to sell 2 million records. Well, that's a lot, guys. Now you're gonna understand how much. And diamond sales was 10 million. Now I'll tell you what's going on in the other countries, which in the past were more or less online following these indications, these numbers. But now things have dramatically changed because we don't have that sales anymore per band, per singer, per artist. Okay? So for example, I'm gonna go through some information of a few countries. Argentina, for gold, 20,000. Platinum, 40,000. Australia, 35 gold, 70 platinum. I don't know. Let's see. Brazil, 40,000 gold, 80,000 platinum. Canada, 40,000 gold. This is now, and 80,000 platinum. For example, we also have the diamond. Diamond is 800,000. Let's see. France, 50,000 for gold, 100,000 for platinum, 500,000 for diamond. Germany, 100,000, already a little more higher, for gold, 200,000 for platinum, and 750,000 for diamond. Japan, 100,000 for gold, 250 for platinum, 1 million for diamond. But again, we're far from what was happening there. Italy, 25,000 for gold. That's nothing. 50,000 for platinum and 500,000 for diamond. Boy, guys, we're far in Italy from the stats in the US. Let's go directly at this point United States, as I said, remain more or less what we were talking about. You need 500,000 for a gold record and 1 million for platinum, which is good, and again, still remains 10 million for diamond. The downside in this is that they're counting also streaming. That's not that fair, I think. Because if you're counting obviously sales, not just free streaming, downloading streaming, okay, where people purchase the digital file, but that's not so. I wouldn't associate that. They should be present both, but they should be differentiated, not all mixed, because we want to know how many physical copies you're buying of that album. Practically none. But again, okay, that's something else. But it's good to keep that in mind. So, as I said, when we were back in the 70s, things for the US were almost double. But for the other countries, now we have a dramatic change in the standards for achieving that award, that certification. So what is happening? Piracy? Yes. Streaming? Yes. Less sales? No, not less sales. Actually, we're more people now. If you think about it, we were, I don't know how many. Back in the 60s, 70s, we're probably 2 billion, 3 billions. I don't remember. Milliards, I know it in Italian terms, miliardi. Well, now we are 7 billion people in the world. So things change dramatically in that sense. So we should have more sales, but we don't. What is happening? It's very simple what's happening. We have dozens, thousands of artists. We didn't have that before. In the rock, pop, jazz session, we only have a few people who were publishing it. The same we could say for books. We only had a small number of issues of releases per year. Obviously, if only, for example, I'm just going to mention, I don't know, let's imagine in the 60s, we're issuing 50 records. Everyone is going to buy, I don't know, half of that? Of course you're going to sell millions and millions of that same album. And that's not happening today, that's for sure. We have millions and millions of albums, of bands, of singers, in all the different genres. I mean, obviously, the one single album is never gonna sell as much as in the past because we have more artists. Very simple. Okay, that was just a reflection on the hi-fi industry. Although LP sales are going up, and we're happy about that. We're gonna talk about that in another video. Okay, last topic. This one is more for the analog buffs. Vinyl editions of a record, of an album, are not always better, are not always the best. That's for sure. Oh boy. As you all know, I love analog. I also appreciate digital, but in some cases, digital is definitely better. I just want to mention two examples I had in the past months what completely destroyed my faith in vinyl. In that case, the fantastic album Californication of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Don't buy it on vinyl. I got the special edition remastered by Bernie Grudman, etc., etc., etc. Boy, that was bad, guys. There's no dynamic range there. The CD is much better. It's all those albums that were meant to be digital, unfortunately. And I think in that case, well, in most cases, it's better to keep digital. Also, another fantastic album, which I love, viscerally love, is the first album, self-titled by the Audioslave. Ooh, that is fantastic, guys. I don't know if you know these albums. They have a few years on their shoulders. They're fantastic. Again, I got finally the LP version. No, guys. Stick with the CD. Much better. Well, okay, guys. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please post your comments on all these topics. I want to know your point of view. I want to know if there's other reflections connected to these topics. And remember, music is born analog. It is.